Good afternoon and welcome to the April 7, 2008 Glendale Water and Power Commission. Sheila, can you take roll?
Commissioner Ibrahimian?
Present.
Commissioner Foley?
Present.
Commissioner Yao?
Here.
We're going to defer the consent items, the approval of the minutes until Commissioner Miller arrives, so we'll move straight into reports.
There we go. I will prepare a report each month on the overall global issues confronting water and power in general. This month, I'll just give you a sense of some of the things that we're looking to discuss over the course of the next 4 or 5 months. One of them will be our focus on reliability, supply, and customer service. That will be our focus as we move ahead for GWP. But some of the issues that are front and center and will deserve some more discussion as we move forward are greenhouse gas, smart grid, supply issues. Supply issues are going to be significant for us as we move ahead in both water and power. Workforce issues. We're going to talk a bit about some of the things that GWP is confronting in terms of being able to obtain and retain skilled workforce, and it's becoming more and more of an issue for utilities throughout the country, not just here in California. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing to look at the issue and try to get in front of it and make GWP strong in terms of future succession planning. So that's an issue for us. And then finally, we're going to talk about something that I believe is an issue that all of us are concerned about, and that's containing costs and capping our rates the best we can. And we're going to look at a lot of different areas, and we're going to talk about what we at GWP are going to do to try to cap rates and initiate areas where we might be able to induce additional revenue streams and optimize our assets. So over the course of the next few months, I'll be talking more about some of those issues. You'll still hear reports, as you will today, on a lot of the operational things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I think it's important that we also look at what is confronting us as an industry and where we're headed in the longer term. Sheila?
Next agenda item is power. The first report is Public Benefits Charge Plan and Budget.
Good afternoon. I'm Craig Keenan, Public Benefit Program Manager. Mr. President, Commissioners, I have a presentation. Promised I would not make it too long. You have a copy there, and we sent you the latest draft we had of our plan and budget, I believe about a week and a half ago. So, this is a 2-year plan, would cover 2008, 2009, and 2009-10. Basically, the presentation, I'll just briefly cover the PBC mandate, past results, our proposed budget, the new programs. So there's 3 new programs we're going to introduce. 1 program we're updating, and I believe there's 21 programs that are continuing. As far as the PBC mandate, AB 1890 during the restructuring mandated that all utilities collect a public benefit charge on their bills to fund programs. Do you want to go to the next slide? These funds they're mandated by state law, and they have to be used for low-income programs, cost-effective demand-side management, renewable energy, or research, development, and demonstration programs. Originally, programs were the mandate was state, but local authorities could determine the programs. But increasingly, that's kind of changed over the past few years. Right now, we're collecting 3.6% of retail revenues for the PBC programs. It's about $6.1 million a year. We have $1.5 million reserved for the new solar mandate that came down. We just started February 12th, I believe, is when we passed that. City Council passed it. We have about $4.6 million for energy efficiency, research and development, and low-income programs. In whatever funds we don't spend in any year, we carry it forward for additional programs or special kind of programs. As far as results from our past programs, in the area of low-income or income-qualified programs, last year we served about 6,400 customers. There was about $880,000 in bill discounts we provided. Saved about $600,000 or 600,000 kilowatt hours in low-income energy usage, and that results in lower bills for low-income as well. Since we started our low-income energy efficiency programs, we saved about 2.4 million kilowatt hours in those programs. In general demand and energy savings, in 2005-2006, we were fourth in the state in energy savings out of 39 municipal utilities. This latest report, we were seventh. I don't know how Colton and Silicon Valley Power snuck in there ahead of us, but all right. Total cumulative demand reductions about 14,000 kilowatts through June 2007, about 56,000 megawatt hours a year. That's cumulative through 2007. Our energy efficiency goal is 1% of sales. And this chart here tries to depict where we at. The line is the percent, and the bars are the annual megawatt hours saved. The best programs in the country were doing between 0.2 and 0.8. We were in 06-07 at 0.74. We hope to meet our goal this year. Solar energy is always a big topic. We have the 261 kW solar project at the college. We're hoping to have that done in May and have a sort of a kickoff ceremony in June, and that'll be pretty exciting. The SB1 that we passed in February 12th expanded our solar programs for all customers now. In terms of what we've installed installed 70 kW this year as residential, and about 204 kW since 2002. I wanted to mention that because when we did the solar, new solar update, soon thereafter we sent 210 letters to contractors that were on the CEC website to let them know about our new program. And that's generated a number of calls. We've got about 30 calls back from contractors. And as far as our source that went out a couple weeks ago, had a story in there about the new solar program, and it generated 80 to 100 residential calls in the past week, and about 35 commercial calls. So there's interest out there. We'll see how much turns into projects, but now awards. The past 4 years, we have one of our programs as one of the CMUA, that's California Municipal Utility Association Awards for Innovation. 2005, we won for our small business program. 2006, the Peacocks program for residents. 2007 was our large business program. And in 2008, our Cool Care, which is a refrigerator recycling and exchange program, we won. All the awards look the same, though. They all look like that right
I want to interrupt for a minute. I want to interrupt Greg. I was honored to receive the 2008 Cool Care Program Award from CMUA a couple weeks ago. And it was an honor to receive that again, as it's been mentioned that we've gotten awards every year. So I asked, because I was flying back from the meeting, I asked to have the actual award mailed back. I haven't seen it yet, so as they say, it's in the mail, but we wanted to make a little presentation at the commission meeting when it got here. So it's not here yet. Hopefully it'll be here by the next meeting. Thanks.
In terms of the proposed budget plan, it's $13.6 million over 2 years. Like I mentioned, it adds 3 new programs, updates 1, and maintains There's $8 million for low-income small business and renewable energy programs. It's $3.1 million for low-income bill discounts and energy efficiency programs. $1.7 million for the small business upgrade program and other small business programs. And then the $3.2 million is reserved for the solar incentives for the customer. As far as general residential, large business, government, schools, it's $4.3 million. 2.5 for general residential, 600,000 for large business, 900,000 for municipal government, including $800,000 for cost-effective improvements to the old police building. And there's 300,000 for in-school. We have like the Living Wise program and the Solar Schools programs. They're in-school programs for the kids, like 6th grade and 7th grade. In terms of the new programs, the first one, we're looking to partner with community development to provide incentives to install energy efficiency and green type things in affordable housing units. The other one is the energy efficient lighting program. There's a lot of emphasis on CFLs and their ability to save energy. Some utilities are just mailing them out. We want to use it more as a marketing tool for our other programs, because once you've replaced all the CFLs, you've basically gotten all the low-hanging fruit, and it's harder to do other programs. So we're looking for a program that would mail like one a year to residential customers and have an online catalog where they can go and purchase additional ones and use it to market our other programs. The thought behind that. And we'd also continue to distribute them at our community events. We do that already. So the green building program, there's a lot of emphasis on that, and we are partnering with planning, public works, and community development. It's looking to provide additional incentives to actually get rated with LEEDs, or Green Point rated as for homes. There's also the LEEDs for Homes program. So we're looking to give cash incentives or rebates for that process, and to link to existing programs. So if you look at it's page 50-something in the report I mailed out, it kind of goes through the whole thing. And most of those programs mentioned in there are already existing. So it's just an umbrella kind of program. The other the program we're looking to update is the one program we won the first CMUA award for. It seems all the SCAPA members really like this program. So LA had worked with SCAPA to do a $50 million 3-year RFP to do this. Well, in that process, there was a number of companies that submitted bids, and basically the prices came down drastically once LA got involved in the program. So we're looking basically to take the savings and put it into installations, because the big cost is to get out there and do the audit and drive there, and every incremental bit that you can actually install when you get there increases the cost effectiveness of the program. Burbank did the same thing. They were at $1,250 and they went to $2,000 per as a limit. Right now we're averaging about $900, so I would think the average would go up to $1,500 or $1,700. And you can notice there's phone numbers on the bottom for anybody listening who wants to call up for the programs. Continuing programs, we have our senior care, which provides $1,250 a month bill discount for 62 and older, low income, and disabled 55 or older that are low income. The Guardian program's a medical equipment program that provides bill discounts based on the amount of electricity the medical equipment uses. Helping Hand is a one-time bill help or bill assistance. It's $150 to a customer. Cool Care is the refrigerator exchange program. It takes out the old refrigerator, sends it to Compton, and they crush it all up and take out all the gases, and then we give them a new Energy Star. That's a low-income program. The PCOGS program targets air conditioning units on multifamily buildings. basic mainly. And the reason why we do that is they're the hardest things to change out. The landlord owns them, but the renter pays the electric bill. And so we found that if you give enough of an incentive, the landlord will change out the unit. You can save electricity and reduce bills for primarily, lower income people. Then we have the solar for affordable housing. It's just a higher incentive for affordable housing programs. And again, the phone number was on the bottom. That's all right. General residential, we have our Smart Home Energy and Water Survey program. That's one of our most popular programs. It's a free in-home energy audit. They spend about an hour in the house going through all the energy and water, the things that use energy and water, and documenting ways they could save. They install compact fluorescents and faucet aerators and shower heads, and it's a really popular program. We have a rebate program that's been around since about 2002. That's a popular program too. The AC tune-up and duct testing program, that was really popular until a couple years ago. It's not so much anymore. We're now working with Burbank to see if we can revive the program, and if it doesn't happen, we might just have to do away with it. It basically works with Procter Engineering. They go out and they do a computerized test of the AC unit, and they phone it in and find out whether it's charged correctly and the airflow is right and all. It was a really good program for a while, but you have to work with local contractors, and we're actually tomorrow having a meeting with local contractors to see if we can't get more interest. Free Power provides up to three free shade trees for residential customers. You have to plant them where the arborist says it, and that basically we're looking for a place that will shade the house in the summer and let the sunlight hit it in the winter, so you save on energy. And our solar program, really popular. The small business, our main program was the upgrade program. We also have solar solutions and small business version of the AC program. There's the phone numbers. For our large businesses, the main program we have is the Business Energy Solutions program. It's a program that allows us to go out and work with each customer individually and design a customer-specific retrofit for their building. And we pay based on the amount of energy saved, 6 cents a kilowatt hour, up to 25% of the cost, subject to other limitations. But it's a very popular program. We save a lot of energy through that. And then we now have the solar program for large businesses as well. For schools and government, the Operation City Lights program, that's the one where we provide incentives to do retrofits in city buildings. The one I mentioned earlier with the old police building. We also have Solar Schoolhouse, which provides incentives and teaching aids and things for teachers to teach solar, the energy and that in the schools. LivingWise is energy saving and water conservation, and they're also eligible for our solar rebate. That's the presentation. Do you have any questions? Or?
One question is the low-income qualifications. What is the rate, or what is the income that is required in order to qualify for the low-income benefits?
I don't have the guidelines with me. They are on our website, and they're the same as the gas company uses. Or in all the IOUs, they have a set amount that gets updated every year. And so I think it's May or June of every year we update our guidelines.
All right, so anybody that wanted that information would be on the
It's on the website, or they can call customer service.
Okay, thanks.
And it's by household, so the more in the household, the higher the limit.
A question and a comment. Regarding retrofitting city-owned facilities, are we done with all the city-owned facilities, or we still have some more to go, in addition to what you mentioned?
I know that Civic Auditorium, we're talking with parks. They want to do something. There's some other facilities out in the outlining parks that haven't been done.
So there's more to go.
Right. And the old police building, was part of the original 22 buildings we were doing, but occupancy concerns, and it didn't happen it's got to be remodeled in other ways for it to be occupied. So yes, I'm sure there's other things out there.
And do we have a program to systematically go through the city facilities, or I'm not sure how it gets initiated?
We don't have a formal program, but interestingly, we were just discussing that earlier today, about implementing something that is a little bit more formal and will ultimately hit all the buildings and all the facilities within the city.
And comment I had was regarding the smart home energy and water program. I did take advantage of that. I'm very pleased with the recommendations that came in the mail, so I strongly encourage all the citizens to take advantage of that.
Thank you.
Worthwhile.
It's one of our most sought-after programs. We're booked all the way through June or July right now.
Yes. Thank you.
I have a quick question on the green buildings initiative. So I guess from the last meeting you mentioned that different departments are meeting to come up with a plan
Yes.
to implement a green building initiative. Is there going to be a schedule or a plan, an action plan laid out for the end of the year to go to council or even to this commission for review?
Planning is the one taking charge of drafting that document. Last time I checked, they were looking at May to have something ready for council.
Okay. Because that would tie nicely with all these city buildings. If they're going to go LEED certified, then it would be helpful to have some kind of action plan in place so that when they do upgrade the city buildings, at least
Sure.
that will be the first one to becomes LEED certified.
Right.
Set an example at least.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Okay, if any way we can push the schedule up, that'll be better.
I'll find out where they're at, and
Perhaps that's something we could put on the agenda forecast to follow up on. I wanted to commend you and your colleagues for putting together a program that benchmarks so well against other utilities. And I was impressed also that you had tied in the program with the Green Building Initiative. There might be some other opportunities perhaps also as you formulate additional strategic initiatives with respect, let's say, to green power and so forth, where you might be able to tie into this program and by using both your initiative and the existing PBC, you might be able to get a reduction in your overall cost. So just wanted to point that out.
yeah, I'll let everybody know.
Okay, all right. Any other comments? Yeah, okay.
Next report is supply and demand.
Customer service comes after supply and demand on the agenda, I think. Or, well, whatever.
President Miller, members of Commission, Tammy Valier, Customer Services Administrator. First, at the previous meeting on the agenda forecast, the Customer Service third quarter report was listed. Since month end just ended last week, we're still compiling those numbers, so I'll be bringing those to you in May.
Okay.
But today I do want to update you on a few other customer service activities. We're continuing our transition from our CIS system, which is Harris, to a new platform called North Star, and I may have mentioned this previously. The look and feel is very different in North Star, even though it is the same database and it is still the same system vendor. So there's been extensive training required for the users, probably more so than we initially anticipated. But we have finally finished training all of our internal customer service staff, as well as several other departments that use the system, including integrated waste, police, fire, and several others actually use the system. In addition to the training, the system vendor came out and spent 3 days with staff to review our business processes and to introduce us to some of the new features and enhancements that the system offers. So we're trying to integrate some of those new features into our procedures, and as a result, we're updating 63 procedures. Those have to be written and documented, and we hope to have those completed and everybody up and running on the system exclusively by the end of the month. Another project we've been working on is to make the counter service more efficient. not the cashiering transactions, but the front counter where we assist customers with new service and some of the PPC programs as well. Out of all of the customers that come to the front counter, which is about 1,100 per month, 27% come in needing assistance with the senior care program and the helping hand program. Of the 27%, 75% also need assistance with Armenian translation. So we've been working with Craig Keenan and the PVC group to translate some of the materials in Armenian. We now have the senior care application and information available. So in the future, we'll be looking at more publications and information that we could possibly translate just to better serve the community while also reducing some of our walk-in traffic. Finally, we just had our kickoff meeting to coordinate the migration of the UOC electric meter database with Northstar, the CIS system. Currently, when meters are purchased, they're delivered to the UOC system and they have to be inventoried into a database. And once they're set somewhere in the city, then the paperwork comes to customer service. We inventory the information into the CIS system so that we can attach that meter with a premise and an account number so we could then bill the meter once usage begins. Northstar has a meter database module, and both the UOC and customer services will begin using that as the central database. We do still have to migrate the old information into the CIS system, and that's where really a lot of the work comes in. There has to be there has to be data mapping. We have to see where there's discrepancies between the two systems. Those discrepancies have to be reconciled. So it is a lot of work. It can be very challenging, but it's going to be well worth the effort. Craig Herman is leading that project, and representatives from customer service and the electric section are both participating in the team, and hopefully that project will be complete by the end of summer. We've already completed it with water. We did that about a year ago, and that's been very successful. So those are some of the activities we're doing in customer service, and again, I'll bring you the third quarter report next month.
Question on the third quarter report. I think you were also going to include
The action plan?
yeah, right.
Yeah, I did want to ask you that if you want a list of the current ones, if you just wanted some highlights of some of the action plans that we really have going. I can make a separate column if you want, just attach a list.
Maybe attaching a list would give you more liberty to include information. I think the more information we look
That's
at, the
doable.
better. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Are you handling the agenda?
I believe I am.
Or if you want, I could do it. I don't, whatever the process is. Yeah.
The supply and demand report, I'm just not sure where that's going to be.
First,
Electric, okay. Electrical services reliability?
yes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Dean Fernandez. I'm here on behalf of Ramona Boeg, who is in a conference in the Imperial Irrigation District. The outage report for March 2008 consists of 3 outage events. And I understand that Sheila has forwarded the pictures.
Yes.
Okay, on March 6th, which is the first outage, the feeder involved was our Fremont feeder number 5, which relayed because of vandals trying to break into 1625 Flower Street. This is one of the on-site transformer facilities that we have very close to our western substation. And as you can see from the pictures that we passed out, the vandals were not successful in stealing the high voltage cable, but they did cut into it, which resulted in the outage. I believe there are 3 pictures there, and you can see how they cut the lock up of the gate. And for some reason, they targeted the transformer farthest from the gate. So, but nevertheless, we did not catch the perpetrator, but we did have a police report done. The second outage is on March 15, 2008. where our Fremont feeder number 4 relayed because of a wire-to-wire contact. Now, we don't know what caused the wire-to-wire contact, but when we got there, the wires are already down on the ground. So that was an outage, and it lasted for 13 minutes. And then the third outage is on March 20th, where our Bel Air feeder number 1 relayed because of a tree branch that fell on the overhead line. And needless to say, we trimmed the tree, and the outage lasted for 13 minutes. So to go into the reliability indices, which I'm sure you're familiar with as far as the definitions are concerned, the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, or SAIFI, S-A-I-F-I, for the past 12 months, which is a running average, was 1.34, which translates to 109,600 customers affected by the outage, by an accumulation of outages over the past 12 months. And this 1.34 figure is lower than the last month's figure, which indicates an improvement, and is still much lower than last year's running average on the same month, which was 2.03. So we are improving as far as the reliability based on this index is concerned. The second index is the System Average Interruption Duration Index, or SAIDI, which for the past 12 months was 50.1, indicating an average time of about 50 minutes per customer. So what it says is that if you distribute all the outage durations over the entire customer base, each customer would theoretically have suffered 50.1 minutes of outage, which is an improvement over the 51.9 that we have last month, and also quite an improvement over last year's figure of 66.7. And then the last index is the Customer Average Interruption Duration Index, or CAIDI, which we calculated to be 0.62, 0.62 of an hour, or equivalent to 37.4 minutes per interruption. This is the actual interruption time that each interrupted customer, on the average, incurred. And so that concludes my report on reliability. Do you have any questions?
Is this the first time that you've actually had an outage due to an act of vandalism or attempted theft?
Yes, this is the first time that an actual outage occurred. We had a case where we had some wires stored in a previous substation lot, and thieves broke into the lot and actually damaged some of the reels. But those cables are not in the circuit yet. But this is the first time that we have had this outage involving an actual vandalism on a live circuit, as far as I can recall.
Please go ahead.
I just have a question on that similar note. Isn't there a way we can educate the public on the safety or the hazard of trying to steal copper wire, especially in live wires? I mean, I know other utilities are trying to get that message out, saying it's against the law, but also it's for your own safety to not steal these things. Are we doing anything in the city to make the public aware about?
I would probably have to defer that to our commercial section. I don't know if they have, or Mr. Steiger.
We are going to do some pretty extensive publicizing of that issue. Along with that issue, there is legislation being introduced statewide that would severely penalize that also. So we are going to have a public relations campaign to let people know not only is it illegal, and there's certain penalties associated with it, but it's also quite dangerous. And if you've seen the pictures, it certainly is amazing to anyone that looks at that. And that was energized when that was cut, that no one was hurt, or if they were, somehow they were able to leave. And,
They were able to leave, yes.
which is just amazing. Oh, yes, we are.
What about, I guess the law hasn't passed yet?
No.
Within the state?
Not yet.
Can we do something within the city? I mean, recommend to the city council to pass some kind of ordinance in the meantime to make it illegal within the city?
Well, I guess we could.
'Cause you never know. I mean, there's a lot of lobbyists who are against that law because they want a junk car load. So it might take a while before it passes.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, anything over $400 is considered grand theft, whether it's wire or whatever it is. So that law already exists in the city and the state. I think what's happening with the legislation, we are trying to elevate the penalties,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. But there is already a law for the grand theft. Anything over $400, I think, is considered grand theft, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Commissioner, that's correct.
Also, I believe that there were some pictures of the Americana.
Oh, yes. At Mr. Steiger's suggestion, I'd like to give you a brief overview of what we've been doing with Americana. Americana has 7 buildings, and we have energized 5 so far. Now, of the 5 that has been energized, 1 suffered flooding unfortunately, on the part of the building where our on-site transformer facility vault is located. And so, you can see from the pictures that I passed out that we had to, take out the service temporarily for that building while Americana dried up, the rooms, and of course their equipment too. So after testing to make sure that the equipment are ready to be re-energized, we did re-energize them. As a matter of fact, this morning, yes. So they're back in service. And hopefully this thing doesn't occur again. We're keeping our fingers crossed. Thank you very much.
Supply and demand report?
And I would add that the transformers that we were just discussing at the Americana were not submersible transformers, but they did submerge, so we're very pleased that they're okay. What I'd like to do now is give a brief presentation on projected loads and resources for GWP. And what I'm going to talk a little bit about is our load forecast, the resources that we've put in place to meet that forecast, the resource requirements that we're going to need in the future, and a look at this summer's peak. Our future resource needs are kind of interesting. Our peak, all-time peak, was 336 megawatts, which occurred in 2006. That was an extremely hot summer, and we've not seen that peak before or after that. In fact, typically, the GWP peak demand is around 315 megawatts. So, it's okay. It's okay. What you will see is that even though there is a projected roughly 1% per year growth in our demand, we are offsetting the need for that with our public benefits programs and other demand-side management programs. So essentially, what you're seeing is a flat projection, and we're fairly confident with that. So what you're seeing here through 2012 is our peak of 336, roughly, that we are projecting as our peak demand each year, and our planning reserve. Now, normally, planning reserve is developed in two different ways, either as a minimum 15% reserve requirement or based on what's known as your single largest contingency. In Glendale's case, our planning reserve is based on our single largest contingency, which is 75 megawatts, which means that that's the largest single unit that we have online, and if that unit comes offline, that becomes our single largest contingency. So that's why it's a 75 megawatt planning reserve rather than just a straight 15%. Our resources as they stand right now, Magnolia, which is a natural gas-fired baseload unit, is 52 megawatts and having the capability of giving us 250,000 megawatts per year. Palo Verde, a nuclear unit, we have 10 megawatts, which can give us a maximum of 57,000 megawatt hours per year. Intermountain project, coal, is 38 with, again, a potential of 241,000 megawatt hours per year. San Juan, another coal unit in New Mexico, is 20 megawatts, 110,000 megawatt hours per year. Bonneville is hydro, and it's 20 with 73,000 megawatts per year. And finally, PG&E, or PGE, Portland General Electric, is hydro coal. It's a system contract that we have for 50 megawatts or 295,000. We also have 20 megawatts of the Hoover project, and again with 68,000 megawatt hours per year. Two wind projects, and as you know, wind can be a very good resource. It is intermittent, however, so we have to downsize how much we actually can expect out of it. But essentially, we have right now capacity of 3 megawatts. And approximately 55,000 megawatt hours per year between those two. And then there's the Ormat geothermal unit down in the Imperial Valley, which gives us another 8,400 megawatt hours per year. And then finally our own Grayson plant, which is our single largest source at 240 megawatts. What this reduces to is our local resources between Magnolia and Grayson are 292 megawatts versus what we generally refer to as our remote resources, coal, nuclear, purchases, and renewables, which are outside of the Glendale environs, and are 163 megawatts. And essentially, between the two local sources, the Magnolia plant, which is baseload and has a very, very low heat rate, runs most of the time. That's why it's a baseload plant. The Grayson plant, even though it's far larger, has varying heat rates, which make it more amenable to being peakers and intermediate units. So that's where we are in terms of local versus remote. Interestingly now, if you look at what we actually use in terms of energy from the local versus remote resources, it's exactly the opposite. Most of the energy that we utilize here in Glendale comes from the remote resources because most of those resources are lower cost than the local resources, which is why Grayson, for example, lends itself very well to being an intermediate and peaking unit. So for the future, we are in good shape until 2012, and in 2012 we lose some of our resources, and if we don't do anything by 2012, we'll have to go out and procure additional resources. Now that's the obvious from this chart. What's not so obvious is that we are currently looking at restructuring how we do energy procurement and resource planning. Over the course of the next few months, we will be doing some restructuring, refocusing, and re-strategizing on how we will purchase and develop new sources in the future. So while this would show that we would not have enough planning capacity in the year 2012, we are now working on obtaining new sources, different types of sources, not only for 2012, but well beyond that. So, to summarize, we do have sufficient resources now. As I mentioned, we would need to add about 26 megawatts by 2012, but essentially that's almost a moot point at this point, because we'll be looking for a lot of different types of resources between now and 2012. If, in fact, we don't get the kind of efficiency or demand side management that we expect, we'd need another 17 megawatts in that time frame. So we would essentially need another 43 megawatts in total. In addition, we will have a need for more renewables, and we will need more renewables anyway, regardless, because that's what we need to do in terms of diversifying our portfolio. So again, that will be part of this entire newly restructured strategy for our portfolio needs moving forward. We do have a contract for 20 megawatts of additional wind from Oregon, but as I mentioned, wind is variable, it's intermittent, so generally you can expect 25 to 30% capacity from that. And finally, for this year, it's fairly straightforward. As you can see, we really can't plan exactly when our system peak will be. If we could do that, then we would all probably go to Las Vegas, but we're not that good, so. But we generally look towards the end of the summer period into September for our peak. However, regardless of when our peak occurs, we do have the capacity, more than enough capacity to meet our normal peaks for this year, for this summer. So that's where we are for the summer. That's our entire supply and demand, and as I mentioned to you, we will be restructuring, so we'll have some additional strategy for you as the year unfolds.
I have a question in this chart.
Sure.
The peak forecast, does that take into account the new development with the Americana coming online and all the growth?
It does, yeah. That will come on, that will gradually come online. It's roughly 2 to 3 megawatts. But the 2 to 3 megawatts that come online, most likely, the way we have forecast it, really won't start to hit till the end of this year, by the time it truly hits, because a lot of those buildings will not be completely occupied during that period.
Okay. And there was a previous chart that shows the forecast for like 5 years out.
Mm-hmm.
Does that take into account the growth in the city and also the energy efficiency and demand response?
It does, yeah.
Okay, that's why it's so stable.
What it does is if we showed raw data, you'd see an increase in raw demand, okay, and then a decrease from energy efficiency and demand side management programs. If they don't come, if the energy efficiency and demand side does not come across as it should, then we expect demand to creep up. But right now, our forecast is to remain flat.
Just one last question.
Yeah, please.
What happens if our projected peak is actually higher than that? What if it approaches the planning reserve? What is the significance of that?
Okay. It would have to come up quite a bit. We have a planning reserve of 75 megawatts, which is fairly substantial for a system this size. However, we still could go off system to get short-term purchases. So I don't see a problem at all if, in fact, we were to encroach upon our planning reserve. Even if we came within 20 to 25 megawatts, which would be virtually impossible because generally of what the load is, we'd still be okay.
But we would be paying for a higher cost of
yes.
power?
Yeah, that's the issue. If in fact you start to lose some of your lower cost base load, then the issue becomes cost. That is correct.
Okay, but there wouldn't be any potential blackouts. It's just people have to pay higher for the electricity.
Okay, I always have to couch my... There's, according to our projections, there would be no blackouts, but you never know in any kind of system. But all of our reserves, all of our resources show no reason to have any kind of blackout at all, no.
That was the first question I was going to ask. For the benefit of the viewers, on your summer demands, you anticipate everything is going to be handled well, and we will not have any crisis such as has been occurring in parts of Southern California in recent years. Yeah.
No, we're in very good shape for this summer right now.
Mm-hmm. I had a question on your renewables. Do we know if those are going to be less expensive if they're developed locally or remotely?
The remote renewables essentially are a little less expensive as we see it right now, yes.
Okay.
The issue on renewables, especially as we move forward, isn't the renewable itself, it's the transmission. Okay, there's significant transmission-related issues to get renewables from where they're being generated to Glendale. And I think that's where you'll see that develop over the course of the next few years, but that's a significant issue, particularly on wind, because of the inconsistency of wind. You have to overbuild transmission to accept full capacity, even though you don't get full capacity all the time.
But even taking into account the distance and the cost of transmission, you expect the remote to be a little bit less expensive.
A little bit less, yeah.
On one of your graphs, I noticed that your capacity dropped in 2008. Was there a particular reason for that? You should a big drop, as I recall, in 2012, but it seemed to drop earlier than that.
We do lose.
Expecting to lose resources.
Yes, we do lose Portland.
Oh, okay.
This year, yeah.
If and your contingency plan in case the demand does not remain flat but creeps up is to look at acquiring additional resources remotely somehow.
Yes, we will be looking at that right now, as a matter of fact.
Do we know at this point what fraction of those resources we're looking at would be renewable, or is that too early to tell at this point?
I can't give you an exact number, but of course anything we do now looks towards increasing our overall portfolio.
Right.
So moving forward, we will probably look at somewhere around 20 to 30% of any new resources as being renewable.
Thank you.
Maybe one last question. That ties in with Craig Keenan's presentation on solar. Do we take the renewable credit by installing or helping pay the incentive to these residential or commercial customers who install
we
them?
do.
So we do take that credit?
Yes.
Okay, because I guess the IOUs, they don't, or they haven't really discussed that, or settled who's going to take that renewable credit. But in the city, we are going to take that renewable credit?
Yeah.
Great.
Next report is the underwater, the conservation update, and Chevy Chase 968 Reservoir.
Jeannie is sick today, so I'm going to do her conservation update. I'm Craig Keenan, ABC Marketing Manager. Be a short presentation. We just have a couple. So the first, this is what we present every month, the water production numbers. And in February, the base, we call it the base year, it was February 2006 is the base month. February, we had, it was 2239. This year it was 1956 was the production. The target was 2015. So we saw about a 12.6% reduction over the base. And for the entire, when we got 8 months, we're down 9.9%. So we're pretty much at our target. In the next slide, you'd asked us to take a look at who's saving what. These can be a little deceiving because if you look at single family, they are saving 8.2%, but they're about 45 to 50% of our sales, so they're the biggest consumer. As you look at irrigation, which are some HOAs and property management companies, they're like 3% of our sales. Their usage is up 18%. And we've sent letters to all of them, encourage them to save, and letting them know that everyone else is saving, but they need to participate. Also, if you look at like the city or industrial customers, It depends on where you started out. The city, I know, has done a lot of water conservation in the past, so the more you've done, the harder it is to save. And I don't know, but industrial, it could be that there aren't that many opportunities to save. This was our first look at it, though. That is the update.
Well, I just want to thank you for putting that chart together. I mean, that's very, at least eye-opening to start with, to see which customers are saving and which customer might potentially have a ways to go. So if we can continue to provide these type of charts every month, then at least we can see if it is a trend or if this is a one-time thing.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what happens in the next couple months, because if you go back a couple months and look at it, the savings for single family was like 2%, but they must have really saved December, January, and February, because now it's like 8.5. Hopefully they'll continue to save into the summer, but then we'll have to push the marketing.
What's the extent of contact with the irrigation customers to encourage them to conserve more?
There's about 200 of those customers. Let's see. We've sent letters to every one of them that are on the account. We offered free landscape classes. I know we had 40 professional landscapers attend this past Saturday to a landscaping class and covered irrigation. And we've sent out the letters basically telling them that they needed to do things to conserve, and we gave them a list of things they could do. So far, that's the extent of our...
And they comprise what percent of the overall city demand?
I'm estimating 3%.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Peter Kapunas, Water Services Administrator. I'm here to provide you with an update on Chevy Chase and a couple of other items as well. Starting with the Chevy Chase Reservoir, we're in a little bit of a hold situation for now. I have a couple of pictures that I pulled off of the cameras, and I think you saw a display of the cameras last time. And let me hand out, Sheila, if you don't mind, a couple of photos, if you don't mind sharing. It's all like pulled off. You see a photo of the construction site, and you'll notice a couple of ponds of water. That the reservoir at this point has been completely removed. We have unexpectedly high groundwater in the area. This was not contemplated. We thought we'd have some, but it's been considerably more, probably because of past irrigation of the golf course charging the soil. The other unexpected circumstance was the discovery of some kind of a compound, possibly creosote, in a small portion of the reservoir. The suspicion is, as in the typical practice of the 20s, when the timber that was used for the roof and the columns was coated with creosote for waterproofing. That was done on site before the reservoir was built. Once the reservoir is built, things are sort of forgotten until 80, 90 years later, and we discover that there's some residue. So we need to identify exactly what the substance is and how we go about getting rid of it, as well as the quality of the water, the groundwater that's coming into the site, and how we go about getting rid of it. We've taken advantage of the time to make a connection to the sewer that runs right by on Chevy Chase, which was later in the schedule, but since we had a little downtime, we went ahead and did that. So if the opportunity comes up to dispose of the water in the sewer, we'll be ready and poised to do that. We expect results from the lab this week, and we're working closely with the fire department that's in charge of hazardous substance, and we'll know how to proceed probably in the next week or so. Any questions on that?
The project is still on schedule, I take it?
Well, at this point, we're experiencing a delay because of it, probably a 2-week delay. You can see on the photograph, sort of on the middle left, you see what looks like a darker stripe. What you're seeing there is an operation to stabilize the soil at a more of a vertical slope than would be the natural repose of the soil. And that is the beginning of the excavation where the pump station would be. An additional spot where we're doing that cannot be seen in this photograph, but it's near the closest pond, the one that's on the left-hand side. both of those excavations have hit groundwater, and we've had to stop. We can't work until that groundwater is pumped and removed. As soon as we have a solution for the groundwater, we'll start dewatering the site, and we'll have the subcontractor, Malcolm is the name of the subcontractor, will be able to move back in on the site, continue stabilizing the site, allow it to excavate to the full. So a little bit of a delay, and we'll see what goes on.
You need it in service for the summer, I take it?
Our goal is to have the reservoir in service for the summer of '09.
Okay.
And the preliminary schedule showed that we could make that. We're also looking at the schedule with the contractor, exploring the possibility of working Saturdays, which would bring us ahead of schedule. But that's a subject for a later discussion.
Sure.
There's a lot to be addressed in that.
That's all, I think.
Okay. If there are no more questions on Chevy Chase 968, there were a few other items the Commission mentioned at its meeting last time I'd like to give you an update on. One of the items was the Metropolitan Water District's rate increase. And you should have received by email the information packet on that. That's the information packet that was sent to the Metropolitan Water District Board of Directors. It's quite a bit material, but it had a lot of background on their budget. It had a lot of background on the three rate options that they considered and the rate that they actually adopted. In a nutshell, their treated water rate was increased approximately 14%. That is, for us, translates to a likely increase in the adjustable rate. We collect monies to pay for purchased water through the adjustable rate. That will likely not happen until the summer of '09. The new rates go into effect in January of '09, and we adjust our adjustable portion of the rate in January and July. So we probably would see the effect of MET's increase July of '09, at which point we'd have to make an according adjustment. If you have any questions on the rate increase, I'll try to answer them. Their budget is fairly complex. It's about a $2 billion budget, about $450 million in capital. I can try to answer any questions you might have on that.
What does that mean for an average residential customer on these MWD rate increase in January and July?
We don't know at this time. The rate increase is supposed to go into effect, will go into effect January of '09. A lot of it depends on our water usage. The less water we use, the less MET water we buy. And the whole point of having the adjustment twice a year is to see what the actual purchases from MET were and not pass on any more than necessary. So we're not really projecting at this point, and we are about a year ahead of any increases hitting the customers' bills.
So if we can continue to conserve water the way we have been, do you anticipate a large increase by the time we adjust our rates next year?
I would say we'll see some increase. It's impossible to absorb a 14% increase in 70% of our water supply with the existing rate structure. We will have some increase, but the magnitude of it, again, depends. Conservation will definitely help. As an example, as you'll see from the monthly production report, this month, because of conservation, our purchased water was approximately 60% of the total, as opposed to the usual 71%. So the more we conserve, the less purchased water we have.
When MWD considers the rate increases, it's a public hearing, I take it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And is it advertised by newspaper?
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of advertisement, actually. And in this case, they had two hearings, one in January, one in February, when it was approved finally in February.
For the benefit of our customers, perhaps it would be useful to announce those events ahead of time in these meetings for viewers.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm.
Sure.
I have no other comments or questions.
Okay. Another item that was mentioned by the Commission was the recycled water plant update. And at this point in time, we've started a study in the engineering section that is addressed at the marginal cost of water. In addition to using recycled water for additional supplies, we have possibilities with groundwater as well. And until that study is completed, we're going to wait and not do any further engineering analysis or design on extending the recycled water system. It just seems wise to have an idea of what the best investment would be per acre foot before proceeding in that path. So at this point, where we stand is we have our first phase. We've reached our lowest hanging fruit in terms of customers. We're still offsetting 4%, maybe 5% of the total demand using recycled water. And as soon as we have a sense of what the best next resource would be, we'll proceed with expanding on that.
How soon might that be determined?
The study is about a 3-month study,
Okay.
so we'll have answers for you at that.
Maybe August or so?
But yes, sooner if it's done sooner.
Okay.
Further question the Commission raised was an update on chromium-6. At this point in time, there continues to be no guidance from a regulations point of view. From the city's point of view, we've had the good fortune of receiving a letter of commitment from the state of California for a $2 million grant, Proposition 50. That was an application we filed over 2 years ago, and it took quite a while of patience and loss of patience at the end, pushing and prodding. But we got the letter of commitment, and now we're looking to see what are all the conditions on the city. The state, of course, wouldn't hand us $2 million without asking for certain commitments and paperwork to be done. So we're in the process of doing that. That will fund approximately half of the $4.5 million study that we've laid out. We're very pleased. That means that that's money that the city does not have to spend on identifying chromium removal technology.
I'd like to commend you and your staff for working so hard to get that. I think that's a wonderful thing worth celebrating. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's really a team effort.
The $4.5 million for the grant or for the money needed, where's the other 2.5 coming from? Is it all GWP money or city money or other grants, other sources?
It's other sources. GWP, the city of Glendale has spent a little bit of money, as has the city of LA and Burbank. The majority of the money has come from EPA, federal grants, and we received tremendous support from Congressman Schiff and Senator Boxer. Some of the money has come from AWRF, that's the American Waterworks Association Research Foundation. And along with their money comes their set of conditions, which results in a very high quality technical product. Recently we received a commitment for about $500,000 from San Fernando Valley businesses who have a vested interest in seeing a technical solution being developed early on. And so that money is being used to match some of the other grant money, and all the grants sort of built on each other.
And once we get the results, or the results from the studies that are being done, are those going to be shared, obviously, with everybody else that's contributed, or just made public to everyone?
It's yes. Glendale's effort is a benefit to the whole water industry, and we've had tremendous interest nationwide in the efforts that we're making. We've had a number of publications, the results of the efforts to date, and we believe that the results of this research will be instrumental in actually setting MCLs that will govern the rest of the industry. So once in terms of regulations, the first regulation that is released is a public health goal, and based on the cost of treatment, then the MCL is established, and that MCL is what every water utility has to abide by. And absent any technology or cost of technology, the MCL is just about impossible to set. So we're way ahead of the curve, and closely working with Department of Public Health to help them develop that MCL.
And I, too, want to commend you and the City of Glendale and GWP for their efforts. I know on a professional and personal level that a lot of people are out there looking to see what's going to happen and what becomes of what's happening with chromium-6 and the testing and what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to, once again, thank you and commend you for what you guys are doing.
I'll pass it on to staff that's working really hard on it. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Part of the cost is also being covered by parties responsible for the contamination, or am I wrong about that?
This is the paradox of this contaminant. At this point, absent any regulations, there is really no violators.
Oh, I see.
So that's where the additional $500,000 contribution from the San Fernando Valley industry and businesses is particularly appreciated by Glendale, Burbank, and LA. These businesses don't have to contribute at this point. They're being very proactive and progressive in doing so. Ultimately, EPA has begun a new Superfund study to identify polluters. And even that is ahead of time because EPA needs a mandate, such as an MCL,
Right.
to be able to go after polluters.
Thanks for the clarification.
If there are no other questions on this, the last item I'd like to bring to the Commission's attention is the production report that we have that's been distributed and it's at your place. You'll notice February, as the conservation numbers indicated, February was very low. It rivals the February of 2005, and aside from those two Februaries, every other February has been considerably higher for the last 6 years. And that's, whether that's the result of cooler, wetter weather, or whether that's the result of the tremendous conservation and public service that Craig Keenan's responsible for, it's really hard to tell. But the bottom line is we've used a lot less water, and we will be reaping the benefit of that. Questions?
I think we're done. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Commission President, we had tabled item number 2, consent items, consider minutes of the
Yes.
March 3rd. Do we want to go back to that, or do we want to continue?
I have no
with-
comments on the minutes. I accept them as drafted.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item number 4, oral communications.
I have Glenn T. Webb on.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Webb. I live 1670 Arbolas Drive in Glendale. I'm a retired engineer. Spent 25 years with Lockheed and left them in 1992 and had a career in electronic systems integration and thermodynamics. And I'm in the process, my wife and I are in the process of installing 13.1 kilowatt peak photovoltaic system at our home on Arbolas Drive. And in going through and working with the staff, I've encountered a few, I'm going to call them minor issues that I just wanted to bring to the attention of the Commission here. Those are involved a metering and rate structure for those that install photovoltaic. And there's also a minor issue as I was filling out the rebate forms concerning exactly how the rebates are calculated. I want to discuss those in some detail on the next couple of charts. And then I want to make a final comment regarding the new California Solar Initiative. I'm also have been in design for about a year on a complete integrated solar thermal system for our home, which will take care of all of our air conditioning, space heating, water heating, and pool heating needs with a completely solar thermal system. And I think that I would like to at least help the city of Glendale or get involved with the state initiative in getting, there's a large amount of money that's been initiated in that program to be made available. And I'll talk about that on the final chart. So we switched about 3 months ago to what's called time of service metering in Glendale. I'm sure you're all aware exactly what that is. We have a new meter installed, which enables, of course, the metering to be done on a peak day, base day, high season, and low season basis. And that's worked fine. That saves us already a considerable amount of money. And also allows us to adjust some of the usage that we have control over, like swimming pool pumps, off-peak times, which helps us all with not having to build new plants and so forth. When we get the photovoltaic system installed, the way that the documentation that we receive from the city right now to make application, we are required to go back to the L1A standard rate. Now, I know that change is going to be made very soon if it hasn't already. The issue there is that the time of service metering does not permit what is called net metering. The two are, for the particular meter that we have in Glendale available for time of service metering, the two are mutually exclusive. I've talked to several members of the staff in the city and the engineering department about how to solve that. They have an approach which they call a 2-meter approach, which may or may not really work or may not be effective. I don't know whether any of those have actually been implemented. but I want to make some suggestions and a few recommendations. You want to go to the next one? There's several ways of implementing both of the requirements of the California law, which is that for those that have time and service metering and install photovoltaic, you must provide net metering. There's no reason to penalize someone who installs installs photovoltaic by forcing them back to the maximum rate and not allow them to take advantage of time and service metering. So anyway, as I said, there's a bunch of approaches. There's two dual meter approaches that are mentioned here, and that's one is to install one non-demand, non-time differentiated meter, one time differentiated meter, and use an allocation formula for the time of use and non-time of service readings. That requires essentially a manual calculation and an allocation of which power is to be allocated to peak and which is to be allocated off-peak. Another approach is to use two time of service meters, one for the flow to the customer and one for the flow from the photovoltaic generator. And this is just another approach. In the case of all of the modern systems, the meter to measure flow from the photovoltaic generator is superfluous. All of the modern inverter technology has fantastic metering statistical capability built in. It's all cataloged with software, put on websites and so forth, and could be made available to the GWP for use just by logging on to the website. And the statistics for your system are collected, at least the system that I'm putting in, which uses meters, uses inverters made by SMA, which is a German company. They're the most modern, and they have not only a website, but software for your PC that monitors the performance, the solar irradiance, and the exact amount of power that you put on the grid, and so forth. And all of that is done with a very complete and modern software package that, as I say, all one would have to do is just read it. Just anybody in the city with a PC just logs onto the site and can get full performance data on a minute-by-minute basis for the photovoltaic system that's installed. So you could do this by reading that from the net, from the metering system that's already built into the inverters, and then using a time of service meter at the house to measure the net inflow. It still doesn't provide the capability that you really ought to have in a long-term basis, which is to install a bidirectional time of service meter with remote control via modem or web. That would also eliminate the need to have manual meter reading monthly basis or bi-monthly basis. There are many of these type of meters in use in the country, and many of them that are, I don't know exactly what the cost of these meters are, but there are many that are cost effective and many of them in use. I have a brochure here, one made by General Electric, which is in standard use around the country. So this is an issue of just deciding to get the right kind of technology and, of course, integrating with the billing system and the paperwork. I have a recommendation here, which is kind of goes along. No, go back. Can you go back to the previous one? Yeah. Could be an interim solution if we decide that rather than doing what I would have to call kludge system approaches with 2 meters in the meantime, to take the amount of time that we need to get the kind of metering we want to have 50 years from now, which is a bidirectional time of service meter with remote readout. I would say that until those meters could be made available, there's a possibility of providing the photovoltaic customer with the base rate 24/7. Instead of hitting them with the highest rate 24/7, we could give them the lowest rate 24/7. That's a suggestion. Of course, it would benefit me in a sense, but anybody else that installs photovoltaic, until we get to the kind of metering that I think we really want to have, should be the most cost-effective thing for the city. So that's the one issue. Go on to the next one, please. And the second issue that I encountered as I was about 50% finished filling out the rebate form is that rather than use the manufacturer's nameplate rating of watts per module, these are based on what are called standard temperature and conditions, 1,000 watts per square meter of irradiance, 25 degrees C module temperature. We are using in Glendale for calculation of the rebate what are called PTC conditions. And those conditions are what the PTC stands for is PV-USA test conditions. 1,000 watts per square meter of irradiance, 20 degrees C ambient temperature rather than 25 degrees C module temperature, and 1 meter per second wind speed. What happens here is that all the modules that are made by all the manufacturers all over the world are tested by various organizations around under this condition and several other types of conditions. 20 degrees C ambient at 1,000 watts per square meter typically yields a 50 degrees C module temperature. When you derate the module, by the as you know, the performance of the photovoltaic module goes down with increasing temperature. That goes down at the rate of 0.5% per degree C. So the PTC test conditions result in a 50 degree C module temperature, and they result in a 12% reduction in watts production and the rebate, since the Glendale rebate is calculated based on PTC. Now, most other jurisdictions in the country use STC for the rating, because that is first of all, the nameplate rating of the module. That is the rating based upon which the manufacturer guarantees the performance of his module. It is also the dollars per watt figure that is used whenever we talk about system installed cost. If you go to a contractor and say, I want a 10,000 watt peak system, it is the STC rating of the modules that determines the 10,000 watt rating. So, and then you'll be quoted a system price for X number of peak kilowatts, and that typically is a number between 9 and 10 watts, $9 and $10 per watt nowadays. So I kind of stopped with the form, and I went and made up these charts and decided I might come in and just mention this issue. So my recommendation is that we change the GWP photovoltaic rebate program to base sizing on STC module ratings rather than PTC module ratings. It's an arbitrary decision to make. It's just a question of what type of incentive do we want to provide, and using STC or using PTC rather than STC does introduce a minor confusion factor for a consumer out in Glendale who's considering installing it, because when he goes to his contractor and says, I want an X number of watts of system, when he goes to the module maker to say, I want to buy a 205 watt Kyocera module, that's all those watts are based on STC and not PTC. When you start derating, you have not just the one issue of 1 meter per second of wind and the module temperature, but you've got sun angle, you've got losses in DC wiring and AC wiring and losses in the inverter, all the way down to 70% or so by the time you get to the actual AC that's generated. But you need one figure that's clear and understandable and easy, so that everybody that's looking at these things can look kind of with the same vision. So anyway, that's just my recommendation on that particular item. And then the final thing I wanted to mention, the new California Solar Thermal Initiative. There was $100 million allocated beginning in 2007 under SB 1. The only office so far that I know of that has a pilot program is San Diego Regional Energy Office, and that is only for their area customers. They have under this program, they have 18 months, 2.2 million. I'm suggesting we should have the second. As I mentioned, I am designing and intend to install within the next year or so an integrated solar thermal system with an absorptive chiller, 10-ton absorptive chiller, large hot water storage, and this system will provide all of our air conditioning, heating, hot water, and pool heat, which eliminates the electricity needed for air conditioning and eliminates the natural gas needed for hot water, space heating, and pool heating, which in our case has been substantial, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this. And I would be happy to work together with the staff to, maybe get a program with the state, get it funded, and so forth. Any questions?
Well, it's just some interesting points that you brought up, and I'm totally surprised about the STC versus the PTC calculation for an incentive. I thought Glendale was doing the same thing as other utilities in terms of providing the same incentive based on the manufacturer's plate, rather than recalculating based on the PTC rating. Why is that?
They all have a different approach. Some are what are called performance-based initiatives, that they calculate the actual AC power generated and provide X amount over a period of years, and There are really a lot of different approaches to it.
Yeah, and I understand
The one
the
that's used
incentive.
by most is a basic STC calculation.
Right. Right, to get your upfront incentive.
Right.
It's based, in Glendale, you're saying it's based on PTC.
It is
rather
based
than
on PTC. Yeah, if you go down the form, and then I had to go find out what PTC is. You have to go look it up on, somebody else's website that some commission in the East Coast has tested the modules, and you get a different figure. And it also can vary depending upon which agency does the testing. There are not a lot of places even that are set up to do the testing. But the manufacturers of the modules, their testing is all uniform. They put the module at 25 degrees C, which is basically 75 Fahrenheit room ambient, irradiate it normally with 1,000 watts per square meter, and make the measurement, and then the module goes down the line. They don't wait for 20 degrees C ambient to heat the module up and put a wind generator over it, have to worry about whether the wind is turbulent or laminar flow, and so it's a cleaner, more straightforward method.
Well, I think Craig's going to touch on that, but let me address the other 2 points, or other 2 recommendations. One was the net metering, and I think other utilities have the same type of installing a meter where you flow the electricity back during the day when you're not using energy, and then maybe get credit towards the end of the month.
Right.
Your monthly
Well, it
bill.
turns out the old meters, the meters we've been using for 100 years, are net metering meters. When you put power back into the grid, they turn backwards. So that's fine, the old meter. But that does not provide time of service. So at night, for example, when I would want to run some of my equipment and the photovoltaic is not generating, I'm charged the peak rate if I go back to that meter, because the meter doesn't have the capability to tell the difference between a kilowatt hour at noon and a kilowatt hour at midnight.
Right. But ultimately, you would net out because you're providing electricity to the grid during the day.
That's correct. I didn't say there was a problem with net metering. If you use the old style meter, you get net metering.
Okay.
But you can't have net metering and time of service metering.
So you want a low rate based on the off-peak period. Is that what you're saying?
As everybody in the city is entitled to
Okay.
do with time of service metering.
Right.
Yes.
Understandable. And the last point was the thermal solar power. I mean, I'm very familiar with the program, and just wanted you to know that the San Diego Regional Office has changed to the California Sustainable Community, where they do the pilot program for this entire state. The pilot program is designed not for the regional San Diego County, but for the whole state.
Oh.
And it was only for the IOUs, though. Unfortunately, Glendale is not part of the IOUs. But last year, they passed a law that says that all gas ratepayers would pay into this thermal solar program. So if you are a gas company employee, not employee, but a customer, you can contact them, and I think they will provide you some kind of direction or incentive for your solar thermal device. So I would recommend you contacting them instead of with the city, because the solar thermal program is a separate program, I think, than what the city is providing.
Oh, it definitely is. But the state is the one that started the initiative. So, and I would be looking for Glendale to get involved with that, and
But there's 2 utilities in Glendale, the water power and the gas, so I think the gas is taking care of that solar thermal because it's displacing natural gas rather than displacing electricity.
but the specific objective of the program is for electricity displacing technologies, such as absorptive chilling, to get rid of the electricity load for air conditioners, which is our biggest peak load problem nationwide. And to me, that's the biggest part of it. Although the solar thermal initiative, they admit, probably the bulk of it will go to hot water, basic domestic hot water, because that's the easiest thing to do and makes the most sense from a financial point of view. But the ones that have some of the biggest payoffs are the technologies like absorptive chilling, which can eliminate the electric load of air conditioning completely.
Perhaps we could have a response from your staff on this, or I think Craig has something to say.
Craig Keenan, PBC manager. Just some quick points. When we passed the new SB 1 regulations by the City Council on February 12th, we included in there compatible rates for, if you're on TOU and you want to put in a PV system, you can stay on TU and get net metered at TOU. So as an administrative thing, that's all been corrected. You have to go in to the municipal code and down at the bottom where it says ordinance number whatever, and these are the changes, because it's not in there yet. It'll probably take them a while to update the website, but it is there. As far as dual meters, you mentioned earlier about whether we want to be able to count the electricity generated for our RPS. In order to do that, we'll require 2 meters, and they have to be revenue quality meters, because we'll have to report every kilowatt hour generated by that system to the state. And the only way to do that is with a revenue quality meter. We can't use the inverter or even net metering will not give you the amount of generation. It just doesn't work that way.
Do those meters...
Dean would have to explain that part. I'm not an engineer. But we've had meetings on that for a while. And as far as we are looking at smart grid and AMI for automated metering and those kind of things, and offering, maybe looking at different rate structures, and so the smart grid will take care of the problem about reading the meter and that kind of providing web-based services where you can see how much you're generated from your system and things like that. And as far as how our rebate was calculated, we could have went 2 ways. And you maybe from the presentation, you saw how complicated it was if you go to the STC or whatever it is. The way we went was we give a little bit lower of a rebate. You go to the CEC website, you look up your panel. It gives you that PTC watts. You know how many panels the contractor is installing. You do a little simple multiplication times the $4, and you know what your rebate is. There's no question. You're not getting in any kind of a complicated mathematical equation with a contractor that's going to discourage participation. More sophisticated consumers can understand that difference. But we could have just said, well, the rebate's $4.50, but we're going to discount it 12% because we're going to use the STC, and you got to go through this complicated process, and the net is you get $4 a watt anyways. So that's why we went with the simple way of doing it. And customers appreciate that. Contractors tell us all the time that that was the way to go. It just, the simpler it is, the better it is, the more participation. That's all I have, the response. Questions or?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Perhaps some kind of a letter or something might be appropriate.
We will have some additional discussion. I think some of your suggestions certainly merit our looking into. But as Craig did mention, one of the areas that we have moved ahead on is the initial piece of the smart grid, which addresses your first recommendation, and clearly you're correct, and that's where we are headed. Love to say we'll be there tomorrow. We won't be, but we've retained a firm to do our initial investigation, and we will accelerate it. So I do appreciate your recommendations and your thoughts on it, and we'll have some more discussion with you about it. And certainly any other suggestions you have, be more than willing to listen to. But we are on the same track essentially that you've put forth.
Thank you then. Next we have Mr. Herbert Milano.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, Commissioners, and Mr. Steiger. And by the way, welcome to Glendale. For several years now, I have, my name is Herbert Milano. For several years, I have been coming to the Commission from time to time, particularly to try to wrap my arms around how we are doing as a utility and how we can best convey the information not only to the City Council but to the general public. For the past, 7-8 years, since the year 2000, we have been transferring on an average of $12 million per year to the general fund. What came as a surprise to us this year was the fact that the city had to go and obtain, to float a bond for $100 million in order to be able to address the urgent needs of the infrastructure. That to me tells me that we're not, at least in the past, we're conveying the information with such clarity that the council knew ahead of time, year after year, what our demands for capital improvement were and what the current state of the infrastructure is. So I asked myself the question, how can the public and how can the City Council know in a succinct and clear way what the current state of infrastructure is, so that it doesn't become any question with regard to the demands in the future with regard to the general fund and the overall budget of the city. So how can we do that? And so I look towards other cities and see what they have done in the past, and I presented to you the issues of the concept of the balanced scorecard for strategic planning and as a way to convey the information in a way that is truly clear to the public. There are 125 utilities using the balanced scorecard. I presented and I copied one of the smallest examples, and I made it to the freedom of making copies of this thing. And basically, even though there are several overall major objectives defined for this particular power company, which is in the state of Washington, it's a fairly small utility. They only serve about 60,000 customers, but the overall objectives are still the same. The idea is that for any objective that you have, you look at least 4 perspectives, 2 internal perspectives and 2 external perspectives, and you decide what those perspectives are. Oftentimes, and most of the time, there's a financial perspective to it, and there's a perspective as to how the public and the stakeholders view the results of your initiatives. But the idea is that no matter what you intend to do, whether installing smart metering, you always look at those 4 perspectives to answer those questions. How are we addressing, let's say, the training of the staff and the improvements internally, and how is it going to affect the public, and how is it going to affect the finances? And so the utilities generally tend to vary with regard to those 4 perspectives, but at least they're usually 2 internal and 2 external ones, no matter what the objectives are that you decide to implement. And so I took the freedom to presenting this to you, and I would love to send you at least a few of the others. I have copies of PowerPoint presentations on my portable drive that I brought with me, but they were much too long to present here. The concern that I have is that it is, from my conversations with members of the City Council from time to time, I get the feeling that they do not have the level of clarity with regard to the trends that we have. For example, the presentation made by Mr. Steiger today was excellent, knowing that the electrical consumption will remain fairly steady. And it makes sense because it says that even though we grow our population by about 1/2% a year, that's residential, plus whatever we bring in commercially, which will be probably another 1/2% with regard to the overall usage, that the conservation is basically netting this whole thing out. And it's a fantastic report. And that shows with clarity that at least as far as the generation requirements, will be fine and well. And then the other part of his presentation with regard to the potential needs in about 4 or 5 years, and what the demand is going to, for whatever reasons, because it wasn't explained. It's sort of clarity that I'm sort of looking for, that in a one single page, I can get a trend with regard to simple things that we are able to know if the policies are making sense. And so when I look at, for example, something that would be simple for the public to understand, let's say, what is the average number of kilowatt hours of electrical use per family per day? That, or for me, in my billing statement, to tell me, yeah, you are improving, and here is nice and big as to what your average daily usage and what the target is for, let's say, a multi-family unit or a housing or for a single-family home. And the same thing with regard to water. What is the average number of gallons per family or per dwelling unit per day as a goal? And I figured that if those goals are much simpler for this commission to establish, to say, our goal for next year is, they just pick out a number, 200 gallons per single dwelling per day. And now you can have a number that is more tangible and easier for families to address. How are we doing vis-a-vis another multifamily, or how are we doing vis-a-vis another single-family home? The issues with regard to long-term projects, though, I think are really, really important because they determine eventually how the city is going to look at how much money they're going to, should we say, hope for a transfer from GWP to the general fund. But looking at what we have transferred in this since the year 2000, had we not made those transfers, we would have had enough money to be able to take care of the infrastructure needs, which means that the general fund would have been in need of some other source, or for the city to do some other type of financial conservation. That, in the opinion of many of the people that I get together with, is our concern. that our budget for the general fund is uncontrollable right now, and that the city really needs to address that issue because those funds are needed by GWP just to maintain its infrastructure properly. So now we're in debt. In additional debt, just like we find with LA County debt, just like we find with the state debt, just like we find with the federal debt. How does it come about? And I think I've seen it now personally here in Glendale of how this debt occurs. And for that reason is that I'm promoting for one department, and I think this is by far the one department in the city that has at least people with the experience and the background and the culture of accountability and reporting of outcomes. But I think we have some ways to go. And I'll just give you one more example on that. For example, when the presentation was made today on regard to the conservation classes and 40 people attended, my question would be, do we know how their usage of water was before the class, and do we know what it was after, to let me know if it was effective or not? And I think that the reports that you get every month that you come in should basically address that. What was the goal in terms of those numbers, right? Did we reach them? And is it significant? And do we need to change our policies? Because at the end of the day, this whole thing, what it does for you is allows you to set overall policy in a much more clear way. So it is my hope that you take a look at the balanced scorecard and those concepts, and perhaps slowly but surely bring that into some type of a monthly reporting so that the city council would know at a glance, in, let's say, instead of having a 2-hour presentation meeting, in a 5-minute presentation to say, here's how we are, and here are the trends. And for the general public to know how they are doing with regard to their own participation in, with regard to electrical use and water use. Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you. That completes the oral communications.
Old business?
Any old business?
I was just one item since Tammy is still here. I think in a few months in the past or last year we talked about putting in gallons per day in a water bill, and I think that addresses Mr. Milano's question about knowing the boundaries of our usage. And so I was wondering what the status of that is. Tammy, if you can speak to it about changing our billing system to include gallons.
Sure. That is actually capable, or systems capable of doing it. It actually would be done through our bill print vendor. I do have a quote from them. We also are trying to have them program a few other changes that we want to make to the bill format. So really it's just a matter of some of us getting together and actually making a final decision on that. But it is possible, and actually the quote came back relatively inexpensive.
Oh, good.
So actually, if you would like, I could probably get that finalized for the next meeting as well.
That'll be great. Yeah, we can get the estimate and see the timing on when that's going to take effect. Great, thank you.
Plans to implement that, then, I take it.
I'm sorry?
You have plans to implement that?
Well, no, I have a quote to find out how much it would be to do, and it's really a matter of some decision as to whether or not we're going to be doing it.
All right, okay. Thank you. Other old business? Let's see, the last couple of meetings we've talked about the Green Building Initiative, and I don't know if there was any news that was scheduled. Apparently there's nothing in the agenda this time for it. I guess maybe it's something we can address in the agenda forecast. Any new business?
I had a suggestion, something fun. I'm not sure if it has happened here at the commission or not, but it has to do with employee recognition. Maybe what we can do, have an employee of the year or every 6 months from GWP, invite them over here, and that will be an opportunity for us to connect with the employees and also our viewers to appreciate, to see the employees from GWP that are being recognized. I wouldn't mind spending a couple of minutes, 5 minutes at the beginning of a commission meeting once a year or maybe twice a year. Something that I had. It's up to you.
I think that's a very, very good suggestion. We will take it from here.
Any other new business? Thank you.
Agenda forecast?
Well, Well, one thing I think that's clear is the recycled water update would be coming out, I believe, in August. Best to schedule it for that, I think. There were several things that were mentioned earlier in the meeting, and unfortunately I came in a few minutes late, but I know our director was speaking about strategic initiatives, I think, of various kinds, and of course that kind of ties into what Mr. Milano was talking about. I see in his thing he provided us here, there's a discussion of strategic objectives and so forth. So perhaps in the next meeting you could start laying that out, or I'm not meaning to rush you, but I know you're still adjusting the job, but as it's being formulated.
Yes, in fact, that is the plan at the next meeting, to start to come with more of the strategic objectives. And I do appreciate, by the way, what Mr. Milano said. It correlates very well with our plans and actually what I did mention at the beginning of the meeting. So, yes.
Excellent. I presume ultimately you would be combining all of the objectives or initiatives into a formal plan of some sort. Okay, very good. So we'll be seeing that. So that would be an item for the next meeting. I don't want to monopolize the time here, gentlemen, if there's something you have to say. Well, I have a couple of more. Let's see. The customer service report we'll be having the next time around. And then there was an issue brought up by Commissioner Yao regarding public relations on safety issues related to copper theft and this kind of thing, which is an epidemic right now throughout California, if not the United States. So that would be something to bring up. Am I missing something? There was something earlier, I think, said that's in the back of my mind, kind of gnawing it, but I can't quite remember.
City facilities, retrofitting city facilities.
Yeah, that would probably be something. Yeah, retrofitting with
energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency. Okay.
I think we also need to add the Chevy Chase Reservoir update, since there's some issues with it going on right now, just for the residents to have some idea of what's going on, since it impacts that neighborhood so much. Maybe just a monthly, or at least next month, an update to see where we're at and if there's been any progress made.
Our budget cycle, the new fiscal year starts in July 1st, right? And your budget planning season starts in December, I would take it. So probably later in the year we'd want to hear about how the capital improvement programs are coming along and so forth, and how the expenditures are coming.
Yes, and in fact that should be very shortly. We may have something at the next meeting for you.
Okay, excellent. That's all I have on the agenda forecast.
Adjournment then?
So moved.
We're hereby adjourned, I guess. Or do we call for ayes first?
Yes,
Okay.
sure.
Aye.